how to communicate change when you didn't create it. I think this is where the internal conflict starts being created, yeah, where people are asking themselves questions like, how do I communicate a decision I didn't agree with?
I think the biggest issue we see is that when leadership starts to become fractionalized, where people make it quite clear that maybe that wasn't their intention or their decision, or they don't agree with it. And as a result, they start to take really quite, I think, a selfish action where you're venting to other people or the team on the decision or the problem or the process, which just instills panic.
Let's take an example. If you are feeling defensive, they will panic. If you are unclear, then they will fill in the gaps with fear, right? They will be making assumptions. If you are feeling frustrated, then they will resist twice as hard because, again, it's the unknown, it's the uncertainty.
Where I think people are unsure of what they have control over or what they can impact within their own team.
So communicating change you didn't create is one of the hardest parts of leadership, but it's also one of the most powerful opportunities to build trust.
Welcome to Breaking the Chain, brought to you by Impel Talent. I'm Nathaniel Chapman.
And I'm Terentia Brown. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Breaking the Chain. I have Nathaniel in the studio with me, and we are ready to have this chat on this topic, which I think a lot of people are struggling with. I think we've coached a lot of people on this topic as well. How to communicate change when you didn't create it, when you are sitting in the middle layer. I think this is one of the biggest challenges, being sandwiched between the different layers, and how do you cascade this change to everybody. So welcome, Nate. I'm looking forward to us having this chat with each other.
I'm happy to be in the studio, very excited about this topic. And yeah, thanks for having me back. Or I guess having each other on the show.
Exactly. I think these are nice. I've been really enjoying us just taking a topic, unpacking it a little bit. So I'm hoping that whoever's listening, that you are taking some notes, you walking away with these tangible notes, but also to go away and practice it. Because whatever we say here is only as good as you practicing it and putting it into real life. So that's our encouragement to you. Even if it's just notes on your phone, or you come back and listen to the replay, we really ask you to put them into action, because without the action, you can be investing all this time, but you don't see the growth and you don't see the development. Yeah. And that's really our heart behind these episodes, is for you to grow, in your own confidence as a leader, and for you to be the best leader you can be for the people around you. I think that for us is the key. This topic, I think it's one of the toughest realities I think people have within leadership. These people sitting in the middle of the organization. So how do we communicate change if we didn't create it? I think this is a tough topic because people don't know what to say, when to say it, and really just struggling with the confusion, really, in a situation where there's so much going on. What can they be transparent on? If they don't agree with their senior leaders and the change, what do they do? I think this is the dilemma that most people face.
Absolutely. I think this is a topic that we see time and time again, whether it's through part of your coaching programs, where I think people are unsure of what they have control over or what they can impact within their own team when they're going through mass amounts of change. And I think it's easy for things to roll up when we don't communicate effectively. So, oh, it's this leader's problem and this leader's, everyone passes the buck when it comes to the challenges they're experiencing. But realistically, we hope that you can take some things away from this episode to be able to, impact your own bubble, and also be kind to yourself on the role that you have to play when you're stuck in the middle. I hate to say stuck in the middle, but in the middle.
The first thing I wanted us to frame today is this middle leadership trap that we find ourselves in. Yeah. So the middle leaders are sitting in actually the most emotionally demanding position in the organizational chart. And maybe just take a moment for that to sink in, because you're getting it from both sides. You are squeezed from both sides. Senior leaders want alignment, your team wants clarity, and you stuck in the middle trying to keep everybody stable and steady. Yeah. And so I think oftentimes we don't have all the information. So because senior leaders can only share, a certain amount of information, because again, maybe things are not fully thought through yet. They are still working on things themselves before they can communicate. And so sometimes you may have half the information, but you still needing to share that or cascade that or roll it out while it's still not very clear. Yeah. And so I think this is where the internal conflict starts being created. Yeah. Where people are asking themselves questions like, how do I communicate a decision I didn't agree with? I think this is a big one. Any thoughts on this one? How do you communicate a decision you didn't agree with?
Well, I come back to the fact that you usually, when operating within a team as a leadership group, so there are going to be decisions that you're outvoted on or that aren't the answer to the problem. But I think the biggest issue we see is that when leadership starts to become fractionalized, where people make it quite clear that maybe that wasn't their intention or their decision or they don't agree with it, and as a result, they start to take really quite, I think, a selfish action where you're venting to other people or the team on the decision or the problem of the process, which just instills panic, I think. It just causes more problems.
Absolutely. And I think that the thing or the reality, you won't always agree with the decisions that are being taken. I think we as leaders sitting in that middle layer need to understand that. And it's actually normal. The higher you go, the more context you see. But those middle leaders really get that full strategic view that the senior leaders have.
And just to your point, Trinja, like there, I think when if you're needing to communicate those feelings to your team or agree to, communicate decisions you haven't agreed with, whether you're someone who has not agreed from that decision from the top or back up from the bottom, you have to be able to effectively still back the decision that the leadership team has come to fruition. So there is a level of supporting the decision and it doesn't mean you can't be there to allow people to vent or be open or to listen. But I think people start to become uncomfortable when there's not a confidence that breeds within the existing leadership group. So before you maybe have to take some of these actions, it's be kind to yourself.
Absolutely. Because actually, when I was doing some research on this topic, something that stood out for me: public resistance confuses people and fractures alignment. Public resistance confuses people and fractures alignment. So if you, as this middle layer leader, is saying to yourself, I don't agree with this, and then you go around telling your team or other people, you're actually causing more confusion, and the alignment across the organization is impacted negatively. Yeah, because people don't know what to believe and what to act on. So I think these are the key pieces for you to be thinking about. That is one of the realities that we face, right? Another internal conflict is, how do I show confidence when I feel unsure? Yeah, how do I feel show confidence when I feel unsure? And another one is, how do I get buy-in when I didn't even get a chance to contribute? Now, this is a big one. When we're working with change management and we're looking at things that changes that the organization's going through, in that middle layer, you may not have been part of those early discussions. You may not have been part of the decisions that have been made. You haven't contributed anything. So it feels really hard for you to adopt and adapt and then also roll that out to the people. So I think these are very normal questions to be asking yourself. And I think this is where the struggle comes in. Another reality that we face is that, your team will look to you for emotional guidance. So even if you didn't design the change, your reaction actually sets the tone in terms of how your team is feeling. So let's take an example. If you are feeling defensive, they will panic. If you are unclear, then they will fill in the gaps with fear, right? They will be making assumptions. If you are feeling frustrated, then they will resist twice as hard because, again, it's the unknown, it's the uncertainty that we are looking at and that they are facing. So when we're looking at another reality, I think it's something for us to take stock on. you actually control the experience, but not the decision. Yeah. So in that middle layer, you are controlling the experience that people are having when it comes to accepting the change and adapting to the change. So you may not control the change, but you do control how your team feels walking through the change. I think that's a key piece, that's the control you have, right? How your team is actually walking through the change. And that's where leadership is showing up in how you translate or simplify or support and really humanize the message of this change. That's where people are looking to you as the leader to guide and steer. So, when we look at the how, and we've said to you, we want to make sure that we always bring this to a very practical space and really just explain the how, right? Because that's the hard part. Because we can read a lot of books, we can read a lot of articles, but sometimes it's not very clear how to translate that into tangible actions, into reality. So let's look at the first how. How do we get clear before you communicate? How do you get clear before you communicate? And I think this is a big one in terms of if you are not uh, clear about the decision that was taken and you don't understand it, it's very difficult for you to then communicate that to your team. So I think the first piece of this first how is really getting you to think about how is it clear in your mind first. So what I can say to you is never communicate a change while you are still emotionally processing it. Never communicate a change while you are still emotionally processing it. And the reason for that is because you may not have the emotional control to give your team a great experience. You may, again, cause them to panic, cause them to feel fear. And so, really, what we want you to do is take the time to ask yourself some questions. And so, the questions that I would encourage you to ask is, what does this change actually mean? What is the purpose behind it? What's the immediate impact on my team? What questions will they ask me? So if you take the time to actually sit and think about these the answers to these questions, you actually get to a place of clarity. So again, even if you don't fully agree with it, you get to understand what's the thinking behind it. You get to ask your leaders questions, ask your peers, ask people around you that you can lean on. And I think this is another big one for leaders, where they are not leaning on the resources they have around them. They're not leaning on their colleagues. They're not leaning on their managers. They're trying to figure this all out themselves. They're trying to, create the messaging themselves rather than actually running it by someone and seeing how it lands. Maybe running it by a partner or a close friend, or or an ex-colleague from another company that helps you to if they have no context on what's going on and the way you communicate it to them, if they understand it, then your team are more likely to understand it. So if you don't know something, ask your leaders. Uh, Clarity first, communication second. Yeah, clarity first, communication second. And I know we always talk about communication, communication, communication. And again, this is really about preparation. The key here is preparation. So the second how do we communicate with alignment and not blind loyalty? How do we communicate with alignment and not blind loyalty? Because we all have our own thoughts, we all have our own viewpoints, our own perspectives. We have different vantage points within an organization as well. So, alignment doesn't mean pretending that you love every decision. It actually means reinforcing the why, it means reinforcing the direction, and it means reinforcing the next steps. This is really what is expected of you as that middle layer. And I think Nate spoke about this in our last episode, that you can be honest without undermining your senior leaders. Because again, we don't want to cause confusion and panic across the organization. So maybe let's take an example of what you can say. Maybe you could say, I didn't design the change, but I understand why it's necessary, and I'm here to support you through it. Because that's really your role, is to support your team through it. You may not have designed it, you may not fully understand it as yet, but you do understand why it's necessary. You may not agree with the road or the path they've taken, but your leaders have been put there for a certain reason. And so, how you can support them is by helping your teams move through the change. Yeah. I think a third how would be, how do we hold space for emotions without joining the resistance? I love this one. How do we hold space for emotions without joining the resistance? So when people react, and they will, your job is to listen, your job is to validate, and it is to guide. But don't get pulled into the emotional spiral. I think this is a big one, where there's change going on. There's so many things happening. Different people are talking in different pockets, and you can be sucked into this vortex. Yeah, this of going through a whole lot of different emotions. And so, if the team starts venting, I would say avoid saying, yeah, I know, I'm also frustrated too. And then joining in and really just everybody now in not a good space and not a good headspace. Instead, I would say, maybe you could say, I hear you. This is really a tough shift that we are going through, but let's unpack your concern so I can help us move forward. So you're not dismissing their thoughts, their feelings, and their emotions, but you are also directing them. You directing those thoughts and those feelings and those emotions into something more positive. You're taking a more positive spin rather than going down the negative spiral. So I think that's also a trap that we could fall into as leaders, because yes, you also are human. You also are getting frustrated. But again, your team is looking to you to be steady, because they are not feeling steady. They are struggling with the uncertainty, they're struggling with the changes. And so they are looking to you. And this is where uh, your, your confidence comes into play. This is where your clarity comes into play. So it's important that you again keep reminding yourself about the why. Why are we making this decision? Why was this decision taken? And how can I play a part in driving positive thoughts um, uh, to my team to get us through this change. Another how that I would say is important for you as a middle layer leader to think about is to translate the big picture into practical reality. Yeah. So, how do you translate the big picture into practical reality? Because that's what we're trying to do here at the moment, right? How do we get practical? Coming from an engineering background, that's the first question I always ask. Is how do we do this? What's the practical steps to get us from A to B? Now, employees often don't care about the corporate strategy. They actually want to know, how does this affect me today? They're not thinking about 3, 5, 10 years from now. They are thinking about today. How does this decision or this change affect me today? And so when we are communicating as leaders to them, we need to keep this in mind. Yeah. So when we keep this in mind, there are certain questions that we can ask, because we want to translate this into real actions. Yeah, we want to help them. And so I think it's important that you are asking the questions like, what changes? What changes? And so, you know, a lot of times when we think about change, and a change is announced, most times people see the change as 100% of things changing. But actually, sometimes if you just really sit and think about it, it may be 20% changing or 40% changing it, and 60% is actually staying the same. So it's important for you to also communicate what is staying the same. And I think this really does help people transition through this change. They are able to move through more swiftly through the change curve because they realize, you know what, the bulk of things actually remaining the same. There are some things that are changing, yes, and yes, it may have an impact to my ways of working, the way I interact with different people, but a lot of it is staying the same. So how do I keep that in balance? Yeah, so that's something for you to think about as a leader, sitting in that middle layer. And I think again, giving them direction. So again, a practical step. How do we get them into action? What do we do first? So again, we're not giving a full script or being extremely directive, but helping people take that first step. So bringing the team together really as a collective, what do we do first? Maybe we sit together and really understand what the change is about. We have Q&A sessions where maybe people don't want to ask the questions, but we could have a suggestion box where people can write these questions, and in that Q&A session, you as a leader are answering to the best of your ability about the change. So again,
At Impel Talent, we've worked with thousands of people and teams. And one thing is clear. People don't fail because they lack ambition. They struggle because they don't have a safe, unbiased space to learn, reflect, and grow.
Most people are growing quietly, under pressure, and often alone. And they're asking themselves, how do I lead without losing myself? How do I guide others when I'm still figuring it out? How do I build confidence when everything feels overwhelming?
It's not that they don't care. It's that traditional leadership development isn't connected to real life. Leaders don't need more checklists. They need space to pause, think, and make sense of their experiences. Because when people feel supported and understood, clarity grows, confidence builds, and they show up more grounded and intentional.
That's why we built Impel Connect, a space for real leadership growth, real support, and real human connection. A platform that brings coaching, community, and development into one accessible place. Because growth shouldn't be exclusive. It should be available to anyone ready to invest in themselves.
So what are you waiting for? Join us at app.impeltalent.com. Webinars, workshops, coaching, and most importantly, community.
Impel Connect, genuine human connection in your pocket.
what do we do first? That next step is really helpful to help people to move through the change. And then what do we stop doing? Because part of the change also asks us to stop doing some things, right? And so it's important for you as a leader to also give them guidance and direction on the things we need to stop doing. Maybe it's immediately, but maybe it's in the next month or 60 days or 90 days, whatever the case may be, because again, you would have had time to think about this and understand it. But also, we don't want to make rash decisions and really just, you know, jump in and get people to be stopping things unnecessarily, or they stopping it without thinking about the repercussions or the impact. And so it's important that you would have thought through the ripple effect. And then the last one that you could be thinking about is what support is available. And so it's good for you to already understand that maybe being able to share with them, they could phone an external support if you're going through maybe layoffs. I think it all depends on the change. Yeah, but it's important for them to know what support is available to them. Is the support available to phone a friend? What are those lifelines? Can they email you? Can they come to you? Do you have open hours for them to book time with you to come and have a chat to understand how does the change impact them or affect them? What I would say is really create a certain time for that, because sometimes when we leave it very open ended, then people just feel they can just come and access you as a leader at all times. Now, remember, you are also going through the change yourself. So you also need to create some boundaries and some guardrails for yourself to be able to say, you know what, on a Thursday morning between 8 to 11, my door is open for us to talk through the change. So that really just gives you also some breathing room and space that you're not constantly being dragged into conversations that's derailing you from your objectives. And it's also giving people that time and space to think about what they're going through. And sometimes when certain questions that people have sits with them and marinates with them, they tend to come to the conclusions themselves, or they ask a friend, they ask a colleague, and then the thing that they really can't answer, they will come to you. So giving people that dedicated time helps them, and it helps you as well as a leader, because your clarity actually becomes their stability. And that's all we want, right? During a change, we want to get to a place of stability, because people feel like when they're going through a change, like the rug has just been pulled out from under them. And so, how do we get them from a place of uncertainty and instability to a place of stability? That's through your clarity. Another thing that I would say to close the loop, and I think this is one that really stays or is left hanging. So, point number 5 is really around follow up more than you think you need to. This one is a big one, because sometimes we have the meeting and people say, "Oh, we had the one conversation. I'm sure it's enough." But actually, the follow up is the key, because you may have communicated something and left it. People need time to process. And then when you follow up, they have questions, or they are really now thinking through the execution. So change isn't a one time announcement, it's actually a process. And so when the change is announced, I would really encourage you to build out these touch points, the touch points that you're going to have with your team. That you will, when will you meet with them? And that also, again, breeds stability and confidence in the organization, in you as a leader, because they know that it's not just there's an announcement and then they have to figure it all themselves. But they understand that it's a process, it will take time, but you are also guiding them through that process. So check in, recommunicate sometimes if you need to, because sometimes, I hear leaders say, but I already said that to them. I do understand that, but sometimes when you said it the first time, their brain was blocked. They actually weren't thinking about, they couldn't connect the dots at that stage. They needed time to process it, they needed time for it to marinate. And then, after a couple of weeks, then they are realizing what you actually did communicate, or they may have not understood it at all. And so, recommunicating doesn't mean that you are implying that they something's wrong with them, or they should have known, but it's really reinforcing to them that different people need time to digest, they need time to adjust, they need time to settle. So we're not making the assumption that everybody is the same. We communicate once and then it's done. Yeah. So the more consistent your communication is, the faster the team adapts. So again, we keep coming back to this word consistency. I think we've spoken about it in the last few episodes. During a period of change, communication, consistency, all of these tools really help your team to adapt to that change much faster. So what should middle leaders be thinking about? What should you be thinking about? Well, these 3 questions I would really encourage you to focus on. Number 1, how do I keep my team both informed and calm? Because sometimes you may be informing them about something that is not going to keep them calm. Yeah. How can I model the attitude I want them to adopt? Now, this is a really big one, because they are looking to you as a role model. They are looking to you in terms of how you are carrying yourself, how you are speaking to others, how you're managing your stress, how you're speaking to them. And so you really want to model the behaviors and attitude that you want them to be living out. Yeah. And then the last question is, how do I bridge the gap between the senior strategy and the daily work? I think this is a big one. Again, It's different in every situation. And this is where you will lean on your managers, lean on your colleagues, maybe lean on some key people in your team who are more experienced, that you sit with them and brainstorm and really try to make the complex simple. So you're breaking the strategy down into bite-sized pieces that your full and wider team can understand, and that they can see how they can you know, make that part of their daily work, that the change now becomes part of daily work, and it's not all, seen as the change, for months and months to come. So you need to think of yourself as the translator and not the messenger, because they say, don't shoot the messenger. And so I'd really say, think of yourself as a translator. You're actually translating that strategy that was communicated to the wider business into manageable tasks that people can understand and that they can action. Because really, as human beings, that's all we're trying to get. We're trying to get clarity. We're trying to aim for simplicity, and we're really trying to get to a point where people want to make the change happen. They just have a lot of fear, and they have this fear because they don't feel safe to speak up. They don't feel safe to say when they are not feeling understood, or they don't understand what's going on. And I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. So communicating change you didn't create, yes, is one of the hardest parts of leadership, but it's also one of the most powerful opportunities to build trust. I'd love for you to let that sink in a little bit. It's a powerful opportunity to build trust, because your team doesn't need you to have all the answers. They just need your steadiness. They need your clarity, your honesty, and they need your guidance. And like we said earlier, you can't control the change because it hasn't actually come from you and you didn't create it, but you can control how they experience it. So I hope this has given you some tangible actions that you can go away with. It's given you some tangible points that you can use. And hopefully you've gotten some food for thought. If you're going through a change right now, what are some things you would need to course correct? Maybe it's setting up a touch base with your team, a check-in with them, checking in how they're getting on with the change. What are some questions they may have now that they may be 1 or 2 months into the change? So I really, again, encourage you to go back, listen to the replay, listen to the episode again, and write down the notes and really put into action what you are learning, because growth and confidence only comes when we actually try for ourselves. We can say all the good things in the world, we can teach you all the different tools and the practical tools, but if you don't practice it, you will never get good at it. So take one thing away this week and practice it in your day to day and see how it fares, how you fare. Is there anything that you need to change? Is there anything that you have reflected on that has worked for you that you can adopt into your toolbox? So it was really lovely to be here with you today. It was really great to share with you some of these insights that we've been gathering really over the last 6 years that we've been doing this leadership development work, but also throughout my career as well, where I had to live some of these things out. And I really can say the things that we've taught you here today is things that I've personally tried myself and have seen it work. So I'd encourage you to do so as well. So looking forward to seeing you all next week again. We have an exciting episode coming up. We have some exciting guests that are going to be joining us. And I really encourage you to participate, keep showing up, because learning in these small bite sizes is really how you will build your leadership capability and capacity over time. So thank you, everyone. It was lovely to be here with you. Have a great week further, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us for our latest episode of Breaking the Chain. If you'd like to see more episodes, you can check us out online at www.impeltalent.com/podcast. And if you'd like to perhaps put a question into us, or be featured on one of our next episodes, you can email us at info@impeltalent.com. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.